Hi, everybody. I am Hayley Mitchell Haugen. I am the editor of Sheila-Na-Gig Online and Sheila-Na-Gig Editions. And today we are celebrating the publication of Jessica Barksdale's book, Grim Honey, right here. And we are also, Jessica's going to be reading her work, and we're also celebrating the spring publication of Sheila-Na-Gig Online, and have a number of open readers joining us to celebrate that issue. So welcome. Jessica Barksdale is the author of 15 novels. She's a Pushcart Prize and Best-of-the-Net nominee. Her short stories, poems, and essays have appeared in or are forthcoming in the Waccamaw Journal, Salt Hill Journal, Tahoma Review, and So to Speak. Her work has been recognized and honored by the Sewanee Review, the Wigleaf, the North American Review, and the Ocotillo Review. She's a professor of English at Diablo Valley College in Pleasant Hill, California, and teaches novel writing online for UCLA Extension and in the online MFA program for the Southern New Hampshire University. Born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, she now lives in the Pacific Northwest with her husband. And I know, Jessica, some things have changed since that bio, so you can update us if you want, but I'm happy to welcome Jessica Barksdale.
Thank you so much, Hayley. And for folks who are here, I really appreciate it. It's very exciting. You know, one thing the pandemic has really just suggested or screamed is that everything is so rare. You know, reading to people is rare. Getting your poems published is rare. So I really cherish this opportunity to be able to read. And I wanted to thank Hayley again. You know, I had no idea what this process would be like, and putting together a book with her, you know, I was just like, well, how is this one going to go? It went great. And it, you know, it was the word Barbara was just saying, this is the word, it is the word collaborative. And we worked on the cover and some of the order and some of the poems. And so Hayley, thank you. It's been great. I'm so proud. I mean, it's not always where you walk around. Look at the cover of, you know, sometimes it's like, look at the cover of, don't look at the cover of my book. Look at the cover of my book. It's lovely. So I thought I'd read just a few poems from the collection, and I'm going to start with the first one, and then I'm going to try to read some of the poems that I ignore. You know, in your book, you sort of have some poems you don't really read. I'm going to read some of those poems because I feel sad for them, and I want to give them a little say. So this poem is Unripped, and my best friend Chris is here, and we have been taking workshops or doing the poetry retreats with Two Sylvia's Press. I don't know if you know Two Sylvia's Press, and we sign up together and we go, and then we workshop with each other. And this came from a prompt, and it is a love poem to my younger son. It's called Unripped. You're the sixth of the 7 almonds Barack Obama ate every night his entire presidency. You're the last breath before a blue whale submerges, its Volkswagen-sized heart pulsing in the deep. You're a wooden rowboat floating over the whale, the fisherman with 1 oar, no, 2. You're the fax machine a year before we stopped using them. The unsigned check from a large, accessible account, the parking ticket unwritten in the officer's back pocket. Your raw sugar piled in a china dish, a deck of fresh playing cards, a sharpened, unused pencil, a pencil sharpener. You're the credit card bill in its crisp white envelope, unopened. You're the untorn meniscus, the unchanged flight plan, the apron pocket before it's ripped. Everything hums. Your hopes, your uncanceled plans, your dirt hidden under bookshelves and behind couches. You're the uneaten baby wren, the raven the next tree over. You're the wag of my dog's tails before they poop. You're the dementia circling my mother's present moment. You're gold-framed, big-eyed, 3 years old, staring, daring me to let this moment pass. It never has, not once. You, the event unshoehorned. You, the ripe, sharp radish. You in your overalls, baby Keds, red sweatshirt, the foggy sky, seconds before cracking into blue. I have this little picture of this guy. Oh my God, he's just staring at me. I've been looking at it for 33 years. He was 3 years old. So I wrote to the prompt, little Mr. Look at Me. I thought I'd read the titular poem. For some reason, I don't read the titular poem, Grim Honey. And it is based on something that happened years and years ago. I called home to my mother's home. And my sister was living with her at the time, my younger sister. And my mom answered the phone, but she actually couldn't talk to me. She was laughing so hard. She said hello, and then I go, Mom, I'll call you back. So then I called again, and she was doing it again. And apparently, something that my sister asked had happened in this poem, and my mom couldn't stop. It took 5 or 6 phone calls. So and the sad part of this story, and sort of I think the inspiration for this book is like there's beauty and there's sweetness amongst the sorrow. And my sister was a very brittle diabetic and died when she was 26. So this poem sort of just came. Grim Honey. I tried to break up, be done already, but memories twist inside me, mismanaged, yanking hard. Break, an irreverent verb, to hold with slivered palms. They may have died, bodies disgorging potent juices, their last days bruises on the permanent record, but they're still here. Poisonous, delicious sugar cubes of story, moths to the lemon, slippery wax on the floor I always walk on. I may hate them, but I love a few like a hammer, something I can smash regularly. Sorrow, a nail, ache, a door desperate to be demolished. Melancholy, a hopeless meteor I miss, image blurry in the telescope. Once my dead sister asked, did Halley's Comet ever land? We laughed so hard we peed ourselves. She's the comet flinging toward us, steady as a ring, around and around. She's the grim honey from last year's harvest, a sweet ambered fossil slicing my tongue with each sharp lick. And I promise you, my sister was smart, but she did really ask if Halley's Comet had landed. And that's what sent my mother over the edge. She couldn't believe it. I want to read a poem that happened in this neighborhood that I now live in Vancouver, Washington. And I don't know if any of you belong to the horrifying app called Nextdoor.com, where your neighbors can talk to each other. In this case, it turned out to be a great thing because I was able to relocate some stolen material back to whom it belonged. But this is the story of what I found. It's called Boxed. On a walk in the dead of winter, I found a box, cardboard tossed from a now gone car, a graduation photo, report cards. Larry is a wonderful student. A small Santa bell that wobbled out of tune, diplomas, birthday cards, scattered photos. I was tempted to take the Santa, but instead I tidied the box and put it on the curb, hoping Larry would jerk his car to a stop and gather it home. A mile later, another box, this one labeled Larry's Funeral. Inside, the guest book of all who attended: Anne Sunderland, Marvin Hinkshaw, Gina Smith. Larry would not be coming to collect his belongings. A quick story follows about how I reunited Larry's things with his sister through the neighborhood listserv and Google Maps. Thieves had picked the wrong boxes to steal from her garage. I wanted his son to have his things, she wrote me. No one else could use them. No one could. Still, I think about what Larry left, how unconnected I was to each object, how unfamiliar every item in his boxes, how known. Poor Larry. It was horrible because, I went through those boxes and it would be like the stuff that you have from your own life that you've saved, like this is really important stuff, and somebody actually stole it. Let's see, how am I doing with my little, I'm doing okay. This poem is called Middle, and I think it's a rant against aging. I'm sorry if I offend anyone while I read it, because it's sort of like I'm just getting out the late middle-aged thing from a female perspective. So it's called Middle. Skin, brain, organs, those that remain, that reproductive flap long ago heaped into medical waste. Teeth, eyes, stomach, that last foul, caustic beast, always prickly. Nervous as a child, pangy cramps gripping with sharp claws as the school bus blasted by. She straining on the only toilet, her sister pounding on the door. Who needed Monday morning spelling tests, teasing, socks slipping as she ran on the playground, hair wet from morning fog? Her underwear, of course, baggy, shoes tied at big toes, hair a crooked kitchen chair cut, dress hems gaping mouths where she caught them on her bike seat, writing illegally in the afternoons before changing into play clothes. All of that a half century ago, where time lives in her fingers on the screen, all the hours in the wrong classrooms, dust in linoleum corners, teachers with clacking high-heeled shoes, the afternoons hot and long and smelly, ripe with the slow girl in the back row who peed in widening yellow puddles. The smack of bombardment balls against ribs, the cold of rainy day asphalt rasping her knees. But she could chase and skip and swing for hours, a whirl on the bars, round and round and round. What once zipped and hummed inside her is dying, but what didn't work is finally kicking in. Like not caring about shoes or hems or hair, walking into the store a wild, just awakened wreck, but smiling at the cashier anyway. You don't like her? Go fuck yourself, and she means it. Do, though, kindly pass the flaxseed, hemp hearts, cranberry supplement, probiotic, ground up cow cartilage, because her limber lowdown is gone. Joints aching, bone on bone, a gasping step 1 and step 2, Achilles, knees, oh. Hand her the stronger reading glasses, the vaginal hormone suppositories, the melatonin, maybe an ear horn. What did you say? A diaper, a pot brownie, a window with a view. Who are you anyway? She thinks she likes you. She's sure you didn't mean any of it. I'm sorry. It's just one of my new topics. Gotta write about it. And this is, I'm going to end with this poem, and Hayley will appreciate it because it's kind of, I think this is a rant poem. And it's a teaching. You were talking about teaching. This is a slightly more polite teaching statement that I might make that I never do. I should do it, but I don't, because I will get written up and get a bad review on Rate My Professors. Okay, it goes without saying. When reading a map, a syllabus, or a prescription bottle, start at the beginning and don't skip the crucial information that will lead you to the main highway, the right assignment, the correct dose, the exact information that will save your life. Also, while you're at it, think about leaving home 5 minutes earlier to avoid being 5 minutes late. It's a math problem that always works, a truth that can't be avoided, even when you wish it could. And there are those tasks you put off for a millennium, the unpacked boxes in the garage from 2 moves ago, the various sizes of clothing in the back of the spare bedroom closet, the hump of storm mud blocking the shed door. Worse things, of course, like leaving a marriage or a job, cutting off that dangerous love affair, saying no to the best loved child. No matter the stuff, not doing it never gets it done. Stacked one on top the other, the little things become the big things, become your tagline, your nom de plume, your mantra, your slogan, your signature dish. Decide is what I'm saying. I think I'll stop there. So thank you for letting me read. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Jessica. I definitely felt that last poem all year long. All those little things did stack up. Before we move on to the open mic, does anybody have any questions or any comments for Jessica before we move along?
I'd like to say that I think you are a master list maker. I love your catalog of examples, your catalog of things, and how it builds as you go through the poem. I think that's a kind of a hallmark of the poems that you read, at least, and I think it's very effective. So,
oh, I didn't even think of that. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I love your sense of humor too. It's so nice because sometimes poems are so gosh darn serious, and you have a lightness, in with the authentic, seriousness of the subject. Sometimes there is that lightness that creates a nice balance in your work.
Thank you.
At least for the poems that you read. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
It's a survival mechanism.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Anybody else want to ask any questions or chat with Jessica? We have some chat going on in the chat. You can read all that on your own separately. Okay, again, thank you so much, Jessica. And Jessica's book is Grim Honey and is available from Sheila-Na-Gig Editions. So I'll be posting that in writing at the end of our video here. Okay. All right, so I'm happy to move along and welcome our Sheila-Na-Gig Online Spring Issue contributors. Now, this isn't all of our contributors. We have at least probably 35, 40 people in that journal, but we have 10 here tonight who are able to sign up and spend some time with us. Actually 9, because one couldn't make it. And we are going to open this reading by welcoming Ellen Stone. Ellen.
Hey everybody, can you hear me? I am coming to you from a beautiful summer night in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I am going to read first my poem from the spring 2021 edition. It's called Hawks. On a 2-hawk day, the sky flashed with white underbelly, a gasp of wing through open trees since the leaves let go. The air silvered with a small shudder at such precision. Whatever I was doubting came near enough to touch, but swooped upward then by her fluid insistence. How I had walked brittle through the world, forgetting feathers, notions of wind drift, barb and airfoil. What keeps a bird afloat? What keeps us moving toward tomorrow? Always shifting view, always from above. And yeah, I somehow wrote very little poems during the pandemic. So I also had my first full-length book of poems come out during the pandemic. So those hawks in my neighborhood really did kind of keep me going because it was sort of a tough entry. I'm working on a new manuscript of poems about daughters leaving home. I have 3 daughters, all in their 20s. And this poem, this other little poem I'm going to read, was written last spring during the pandemic, and it just came out in the summer issue of Door is Ajar, which is a little online journal, and a number of the folks that are editors are from my home state of Pennsylvania. So this is called The End of Girlhood, after James Wright and Joni Mitchell. Just off the highway, scrub brush, cast off trash, thin trees blooming, so abrupt, gash of common pear, serviceberry, years I gave away my body in a rush. What I could not tame with rationality, tears and moons, me a Ferris wheel, wild, round thing, swirling in the night, glowing circle dance, following with no apology. At each stop, taking, discarding, brazen dreams and scheming, all the while looking over my shoulder, tossing salt, mourning the soft give of June, not going home. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Wonderful. Great job. All righty. We are going to move on to Rebecca Brock. And Sheila-Na-Gig Online runs quarterly contests, and Rebecca was the winner for our spring edition. So welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
I'm not very good at Zoom. I'm not practiced at it. I was going to read one of the poems from Sheila-Na-Gig that's about my youngest son. I write about my son's a lot. Quarantine and being home is what I'm surrounded by. So this one's called Pre-Op. The surgery room, after the bustle and baby talk of the press, is a bright, unremarkable surprise. Also cold, masks and hats looming. The old look older, I assume because I know the small look smaller. The vulnerable, well, I'm only allowed back because I am the mother. And the medical staff are doing camaraderie, the wink and the nudge and the friendly fire before the undoing, before repairing the undone. It is hard for me to act as though it is not hard to be alive. My boy is stiff and terrified and breathing quick, willing himself to hold, to stay still. Even still, he grimaces at the anesthesia mask, and I reach to help hold it. Well, aren't you useful, Mom? Someone says. I mumble something back, but that's the whole of me, there, holding the mask, and he's trying not to go under. His eyes trying to open up against their clothing. He pants into the mask, fighting. And I'm telling him, this child, this boy, whom I've taught everything, from look both ways to pedal, 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 to C-A-T, cat, to 1 + 1, to wash your hands, brush your teeth, wash your parts, don't hug your friends so hard, say please, say thank you, look people in the eye when you speak, breathe, buddy, just breathe. He fights until it seizes him, the easy drift, a hard crash. I say what all the mothers must say, he's really special, and find myself making thank you hands, pleading prayer hands, please and thank you and God bless hands. 2 of the nurses can't meet my eyes. One is crying. Maybe other mothers are tougher, or maybe nurses understand more than most, or maybe it was just him, that last fight he gave before going out, that spirit, its pulse and serve, its oddity and sight. A little nervous. I'm a newbie. Sorry, everyone. Thanks for your patience with me. The next one I was going to read was about, it was in the Kin Literary Journal. I think their 6th edition. It's called The Story They Are Telling Now, after Kavanaugh, during Trump. The thwack, thwack, thwack of something breaking, something falling, startled me this morning, brought me out. My breath a cloud I stepped through as I pulled my bathrobe close and found you, lobbing an old brick at some frozen ice in our small yard. I glanced toward the neighboring houses, snugged wall to wall with ours, and wondered who you wove. You have always thrown things, forgetting you were indoors, forgetting the fragility of glass, narrowly missing your little brother's head, cringing if it hit your father or the dog. It served you well in Little League. Even now, nothing stays in your hands for very long, as if you are still testing gravity, testing me, to see if I will stoop and pick things up. Thwack. It doesn't break, you grinned at me, red-cheeked, so that I saw you 4 or 5 years ago, peering out from the length of you now, your hair a trademark shag, your face taking on my father and yours. I never would have thought to do that, I said, and knew it maybe wasn't true. I've just been told a different story all my life about what there is to lose and how often things can't go back to what they were. I know the story they are telling you now, the one they've been telling you since you were born, the same one they told your father and your grandfather, isn't as true as they say. You don't have to throw yourself against anything to see if you will break. I can tell you, you will. Lately, I can't seem to find a way to tell you I understand. It feels like flying and falling, both. The world is always becoming, but it's also what it's always been, and it matters what you break. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Wonderful. Thank you. Our next reader is a multiple time appearing in Sheila-Na-Gig online, various different editions, as are a number of you here tonight. Generally, once I accept somebody's work once, when you come knocking, I generally continue to enjoy your work, so keep coming. This reader is John Palen. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Hayley. I wasn't able to ride the bus around town during COVID, and I got severely visually deprived. So I started checking out art books, and I started writing ekphrastic poems. So this is one. It's based on a self-portrait by one of my favorite painters, Edward Hopper. It's a portrait he made in about 1925 to 1930. And the title of the poem is A Carefully Dressed Man. He is turned partway toward us, this man in a soft brown fedora, comfortable gray jacket, green tie, blue shirt with upturned collar tips. At his back, a blank wall, plain baseboard at the floor line, an unopened door in cove framing. Is he going out? And where? Under the wide brim's shadow, light falls on the neck, cheek, and fleshy mouth. In the eyes, something vulnerable and elusive, the way they half observe us, half look away. Is it our gaze he shies from, or his own? And it just occurred to me that a lot of that is I think maybe the painting appealed to me because there's a sense of isolation about it that I think so many of us felt during this last year. So it's gardening time, and what could be better than a poem about gardening? And this also appeared in Sheila-Na-Gig. And I talked to this gardener yesterday while I was out picking beetles off of the potato plants, and he's still raising the best garden at the community gardens. This is the gardener in plot 23. As old-fashioned as the windmill that lifts its galvanized blossom high over the community gardens, he plants straight rows, keeps them weeded with hands and hoe and mulch, comes daily before it's hot. When first-timers show up on weekends to work their raised beds and puzzle over sickly tomatoes and unthinned corkscrew carrots, he smiles, gives a little wave, and leaves the book of his garden open for them to read. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thanks for coming by. Everybody's clapping. Can't hear it, but they're all clapping. Okay. Our next contributor is also a frequent contributor to Sheila-Na-Gig Online, and I'd like to welcome Cynthia Anderson.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm just going to read one poem, and this is about where I grew up. I live in California now, actually in the desert, but I grew up in Connecticut in the woods. Totally different environment and a great place to grow up. And there was a lot of bird life in the 60s, and every once in a while we would see a pileated woodpecker, which was a big deal. They're quite spectacular birds, at least they were to us. So this is pileated woodpecker. He would come to the clearing behind the house, an opening between woods and swamp, thick with dead leaves and downed trunks. From a back window, I heard him drum, beak pounding a rhythm old as conifers, carpenter ants. I didn't get any closer, didn't try. Sightings were rare in the 60s, everywhere, the snarl of chainsaws. He was the most exotic bird I knew, red-crested, crow-bodied, ignoring seed at a feeder, though he did sneak suet from wire mesh nailed to a pine. He would vanish into the stand, still wild enough to hide him, and I would watch him go, hungry for the next glimpse of a life I couldn't follow. Thanks.
Thank you. And the birds chirping in John's reading would go well with that, with that poem. So thank you. It's really great to see you all live. A number of you, I've published a couple times in Sheila-Na-Gig, and I just see your little pictures, but to meet you all live just brings it all together. So thank you for being here. Our next two readers also appear in a special project that we completed recently with Sheila-Na-Gig Editions, and I'm going to hold it up here. This is called Pandemic Evolution, and this is over, this is a 300-page book that includes artwork by my friend, the West Virginia native Matt Wolf. And for the first 100 days of the pandemic, he made art installations that you can see on the cover here, and they changed every day. And he photographed them and he put them online. And they were so powerful to me that I said, this needs to be a book. And I invited, just sent out a general call for submissions and asked poets to respond to the photos. I'm just really proud of this one. It's just been a great experience. We have 46 poets, 76 poems to go with the 100 pictures. Poets from all across the nation, a couple from India and Canada and Wales. So this has just been a wonderful experience. A number of pandemic poems in there as well. But Roberta Schultz and Alan Walowitz are both in there. Roberta, I think you're in there. If I'm not,
I don't think I am.
Are you not in there?
I don't think I am. That's why I thought
okay. Roberta Schultz will be in the next one. I'm confusing you with another Schultz, but that's okay. Alan Walowitz, I know is in there for sure. But Roberta, I know has been in multiple issues of Sheila-Na-Gig. So thank you for being here, and welcome, and go ahead and read your work.
Thanks for having me. Both the poems I'm going to read tonight are either an answer to a poet or after a poet. This first one was in the spring issue. I think he heard it wrong. An answer to Morris Manning's A Blasphemy. I would have believed it, how that man, a little hard of hearing perhaps, prayed for his people, the trees and cows, and all the living things near his place, the very night itself, who rocked that place to sleep, his soul intent to mend and tend that place so hard, his dreams became a part of his chores. to pray to the us above, who, let's be honest, takes some knowing that there is an us beyond the we see and touch and smell, and a caring about the happiness of those we share our pronouns with. I want the you, that is you, not to laugh for a minute and think about the root of someone praying to old Yam. How maybe on a day long ago that man might have heard a song sung by a choir next to a river about the great I Am, and it stirred him to conjure up that yonder you as an ancient sweet potato buried deep in rich dirt, just waiting for rough hands to unearth it. Now that ain't funny. Heck, I reckon it's deep. And this next one is after a poem by Judith Hemschemeyer, and it is in my latest chapbook from 2020 that did come out during the pandemic, so I've not done a lot of reading from it. It's called Song. After Gift by Judith Hemschemeyer. Let me tie this song around your finger, not now, when the bold print of your life, like a high-definition billboard, is reminding, prompting you along. Hosts of bright exits announcing every turn. But later, if ever you follow a dark ramp into the loop and signs blur or mumble no re-entry, or stop your breath with a jolt of dead end, then unwind this twine to find the tune again, a spare thread for your journey home. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you, Roberta. Okay. All right, I've lost my list, but I think Alan was next. So Alan, go ahead. And
Thank you, Hayley, and congratulations to Jessica on your book and beautiful reading tonight. This is my poem from Sheila-Na-Gig in the spring, and it's called Carnival in Venice, which also happens to be the name of the song that ended my career as an accordionist when I was 8. Carnival in Venice was up next in the method book, though John, my teacher, the accordion of patience, showed me over and over how it ought to go. I couldn't get these hands so opposed to act as one either side of the bellows. It was time I decided to ditch this contraption, go out and have a catch. My mother, who used to claim she had ice water in her veins, took the news of my resignation as if it was expected, except I saw the upset in her downturned mouth, and she launched at me the very same sigh I'm known to make to this day, right before my own kids say to me, God, what did I do wrong? I hated to disappoint my mom and should have stuck with that thing. The accordion cost $5 a week to buy on time, months to own. Big money then, but sometimes you've got to ready your folks for the heap of disappointment still to come. John didn't seem to understand when he heard a small voice on the other end. I can't do Carnival in Venice, and then hung up. I never saw him again. Somehow, he must have figured it was me. And my next poem was originally called These COVID Days, and I'm hoping we're almost at the point where I can change the title to Those COVID Days, but you know, everyone has to make their own decision. But I do know as a writer, we have to get those COVID poems out there while we can. These COVID days, wisdom alone and our higher self ought to say, these days are handed to us, not quite for free, but almost gifts. And we ought to be unto them like worker bees, charged only with avoiding the mediocrity of substandard honey, underpollinated, and worse. Too much delay in what ought to be its joyful making. What a waste. Hours spent thinking, just another swamp in this, the daily grind, the sameness, the futility, the muck up to our knees. And isn't it time for tea, or better yet, happy hour? So we might get lost in the empty space of the dusk, or whatever we name the darkness that seems like the plague, bound to swallow us. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Alan. Always wonderful to hear you. Thank you. Our next reader is Marc Swan, and Marc kicked off the whole Sheila-Na-Gig Editions when I published his book, Today Can Take Your Breath Away. So it seems like such a long time, but it was really only like, what, 3 or 4 years ago. So welcome, Marc. I don't see you. I don't know where you went, but you're out there somewhere.
I'm up here.
There you are.
Yeah.
And you can also find Marc's work in just about, I think, all of our issues of Sheila-Na-Gig Editions as well, in addition to his book. So these are.
And I thank you for that. Wow, I look kind of foggy in this. Let me knock this light down a little bit.
Yeah, you do look a little blurry.
How's now?
Still a little blurry, but that's okay. We can hear you.
Yeah, I had trouble with my computer, so I have my wife's, and she doesn't like to clean the screen. Welcome from coastal Maine, and I'm going to read a poem from the current issue of Sheila-Na-Gig. And again, I always do this, but I'm once again thanking Hayley for all her support for many, many years in print and online. So the poem I'm going to read is from the fresh edition. It's called Oyster Sunday. In the cold, never-ending, it seems, days of winter in Maine, trying to find spring, one respite is the routine of Sunday afternoon oysters with white wine, crisp and chilled from Sonoma County. This week, Eider Cove and moon dancers freshly harvested from coastal fingers that drop down into Casco Bay. On the second day of spring, water too cold for swimming or boating, ice floes lodged against the banks. A neighbor walks by from the dock, barefoot in a wetsuit, red paddleboard under one arm. I ask of the water. Brr, he said, can't feel my toes. I smile, see my younger self walking alongside this 40-something, carrying my board. Not red, but festive in its own right. Life in coastal Maine. Thank you, Helen. And for our second one, a small poem, because Hayley did say second poem, small poem. It's from my book that also came out last year during the pandemic, and I don't know if you can see it, but it's All It Would Take. The publisher was out of London. He's a friend of mine. He's been a good support through the years. And he has also been in Sheila-Na-Gig and their issues. The poem I'm going to read is called Tangier. Tangier is one of the few places left in the world where, so long as you don't proceed to robbery, violence, or some form of crude antisocial behavior, you can do exactly what you want. William S. Burroughs. When I say Tangier, a small bell rings. I hear a call to prayer in a language unknown to me. Think of Burroughs, Kerouac, Ginsberg, Corso, Ferlinghetti. Peripatetic beats who frequented those dusty streets, narrow alleyways, crowded thoroughfares, slipping into the mix, doing what they wanted to do. No permission asked, no red tape, just getting there was all it would take. And that became the title of the book. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Marc. And I should note that Marc used to appear in our print volume of Sheila-Na-Gig in the 90s. So we've known each other a long time and somehow found each other again when I went online with Sheila-Na-Gig. So it's great to have that continuing connection. Appreciate it. All righty. Our next reader, I have had the good fortune of publishing 2 of his collections through Sheila-Na-Gig Editions, and these are most recently The Noise of the World and also Traveling for No Good Reason. Please welcome George Franklin.
Thank you, Hayley. Thank you. And again, as Marc said, you are incredible, and thank you for your support that just seems unending. So thank you very, very much. I'm going to read 2 poems, one from the spring edition and one from the current one that just came out. The one I'm going to read from the spring edition is called Bellini's Annunciation, and it's an ekphrastic poem based on the painting. And I think the description of the painting is within the poem, so I don't really have to say very much about it. Just maybe that there is a window at the back of the painting looking out on what Bellini obviously thought was the real world. Their faces are soft, both Mary's and Gabriel's. Their hands touch the world as light touches objects, gently, without force. Gabriel holds a stalk of lilies, and the Madonna, who is not yet the Madonna, rests one hand on the pages of a book, the other over her heart as though to remind herself that it still beats. She hasn't noticed the angel. He's entered as wind enters from a hallway, his wings dark and heavy, his gray robe creased and bent out of shape like armor after a battle. Behind the Virgin, a landscape, buildings on a hill, a lone cloud, some mountains drawn crudely. This is the world outside the painting, a world different from the one held in place by the angel, the Madonna. Bellini says to us, choose. There is the dullness of a dream, a landscape painted with indifference. And here is the moment of becoming, every detail sharper than your eye can comprehend. The blush on the Virgin's cheek, the whiteness of her neck, the blue robe that seems too large for her. What reality is so real as these white lilies carried by the angel? The fire orange pollen that covers their stamens, the angel's hair that flies above his shoulders, the same color, the same fire. In the time it takes to draw a breath, the Virgin will look up, the angel will speak. Quick, choose before it's too late. And the other poem from this issue, the current issue of Sheila-Na-Gig, is called Writing About Your Country, and it's for Jimena Gomez. In the next room, you're writing about your country, about a man who wouldn't leave his farm and was killed by paramilitaries, about hillsides thick with trees, green moss covering a stone, a boulder. It makes me think of our friend Federico, who practices medicine in a small town in the Andes. I hunted for it on the map and it was hard to find. The pictures on Google showed a white church and narrow streets, nearby mountains, clouds that seemed close. In the next room, you were close also, closer than clouds hovering above a valley or the sound of motorcycles fading into something that's almost silence. I can hear a piano, passages of Chopin, a disc that you're playing on an old laptop as you work, a few dates and almonds in a bowl within reach, as close as the asylum narratives you translated, refugees who applied for visas during the bad years, years that haven't stopped, applicants threatened by gangs, by paramilitaries, guerrillas, so many stories you had to find words for in cold, precise English, voices you transposed from Colombia or Venezuela, reminding you of relatives in Cali, or when you taught workshops in Buenaventura, voices to cut through the dull glaze of immigration officials, their eagerness to find work, their eagerness to finish work, to go play golf or tennis on the weekend. In the next room, I can hear you whispering lines of a poem the same way I do, the same way we all do when we write, listening to ourselves, to our own voices, trying to decipher the words that will break through our own dull gaze. In the next room, you are writing about your country, which is both far away and close to you. From where I'm sitting, I can hear you whisper. Thank you.
Wonderful. Wish you could hear everybody else clapping for you. Wonderful, George. Your poems always feel like a gift to Sheila-Na-Gig, and I feel that way about everybody's poems, but especially George. You know, he said, "Here's a poem," and I think, why are you giving me this? It's so wonderful. So thank you, George.
You're way too kind. Thank you.
No, I'm not. All right, we have one more reader this evening, and many of you may already know her through her editorship of Swim Every Day in Florida. So I'm happy to welcome Jen Karetnick.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so sorry. We have a puppy out here with us, and he's just jumped off the couch and hit his head. And it shouldn't be funny, but it really was. So that last poem wasn't funny. It was very poignant, and I was laughing. It is about puppies. They're like so clumsy. I'm going to read this one poem that appeared in Sheila-Na-Gig, which I was so grateful that you took, because everybody loved it when I would read it at a reading, and then nobody wanted to publish it because it was kind of long. And I'm just like, okay, great, thank you so much. But then you were like, yay, you liked it. And I was so happy. And then I'm just going to read a short poem from my most recent book. So this is called, and I should say this is actually a true story. This is a Twitter account called Death followed me on Twitter. So when I went to actually look up this Twitter account, these are all things that this Twitter account was tweeting. If you want to go look up this Twitter account now, it no longer exists. So I was fact-checked on this poem. Somebody told me that. During quarantine, I discovered that death follows me on Twitter. Death tells me our relationship is complicated and wants to simplify things. Death tells me about soul midwives and death doulas, flashlight-armed ushers to that final throne. Death tells me to decide now between a 12-piece jazz band and Rush's 2112 for my service. Death tells me that wearing a Fitbit may help me die better, 10,000 steps toward a daily end. Death tells me when Wimbledon is canceled, the history behind the sudden death tiebreak. There used to be a lingering death tiebreak, but that was put to death. Death tells me the florists known for reliability and fair pricing. Death does not know the scent of flowers aches my temples, throbs my veins. Death tells me the statistics on selfies, officially 5 times more fatal than shark attacks. Death tells me jokes, like the one about the man who invented autocorrect dying. Restaurant in peace, Death says. Death tells me as the US women's soccer team fights for equal pay, that captains of losing teams were traditionally sacrificed. Death wants to know if I will put down my surviving pets when I die. Death is feeling ancient Egyptian, but walks like a cop in a donut shop. Death wants me to take one last rum safari in Jamaica, drink Mama Juana with the locals. Death tells me that dying on holiday does happen, presumably by selfie. Death does not know that vacations have also died. Death tells me lies from obituaries, such as, Frida sledgehammered every rule of healthy eating to obtain a nice long life. Death tells me about direct cremation, how I can be turned into ash without a priest. Death does not know that I'm Jewish, despite skin etched into graphic anecdotes. Death tells me stories like the one about the golden retriever trained to bring tissues to mourners at a funeral home. Death asks if I've seen Michael Jackson around. Death is not old enough to ask about Elvis. Death posts links for alternative hearses. My coffin can be carried by a Harley-Davidson sidecar, Volkswagen camper van, horse-drawn carriage, fire engine, vintage truck, bicycle, or Land Rover capable of an off-road detour. Death tells me grief will compound chronic pain, speed up an illness. Death tells me to appoint a digital executor to care for my social media estate. Death tells me how I can be unburied in a coffin made of willow or bamboo that biodegrades so that my bones will be available to earth, my reception embraceable as limbs. Death does not know that I live at sea level, where mangroves snarl the sand. Death tells me how I do and do not feel twice per day, sometimes 3 times. Death tells me to be hashtag death positive, but so often the numbers say otherwise. I don't know if you can hear that in the background, but that's one of our invasive frogs. He says, uh-oh. I love them, but we're not supposed to love them. We're supposed to kill them if we see them. I have very conflicting emotions about that.
You had a little lizard or something crawling on the screen behind you when you were reading too. It's gone now, but he was great.
At least it's not a termite swarm.
He ate 2 termites.
Oh, did he?
I watched him.
He ate 2 termites, apparently.
Well, there we go. That was great.
Florida is always a very interesting place. It's actually really, really hot out here. It's been very, very warm. So I'm going to read a poem about the summertime, but this is summertime in New Jersey. This is from my most recent book, which is called The Burning Where Breath Used to Be. And it's called Plexiglass Suburbia. It's actually about my brother, but it does mention the weather. And it's a golden shovel after William Carlos Williams' famous poem, I Think You'll Hear the End Words. In the summertime, when New Jersey humidity is so thick, it can be kneaded like dough. And there isn't much to do besides taunt and be taunted. Everything depends on making the Daredevil Club. Admittance is granted upon a feat of such physical audacity that even a Spartan, even a boy like my brother, cannot deny the legacy of red, stippled scars it will surely leave behind, the wheelbarrow of flesh and courage that can be carted away in equal glazed measures from the site. My turn. At the top of North Ashby with the neon orange skateboard no one knows how to ride, in rain that has been falling for days, collecting in the potholes, the water rubicund with clay from half-built housing developments beside our cul-de-sac. In my imagination, I crouch and glide, but in the end, I sit, knees to chest, and cast off an unguided blur of white. It's no use. I arrive clean and whole to be cast down with chickens. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you to all of our readers, and thank you again to Jessica Barksdale for the amazing opportunity to publish her book, Grim Honey. I'll be putting information up at the end of the program.